I'm going to run through a quick altcoin analysis after already doing a Bitcoin analysis video. And we're going to start with, Ethereum. I just knocked something over my desk, it's all good. We can see here that the weekly BX trender on Ethereum looks like it is going to close light green again for the first time in quite a while. Now, if we have a look at the last time it closed light green, we turned dark green again, but never turned red. So you would have had to hold through this drawdown from 2700 down to 2300 before you would have been rewarded with this lovely pump to 3100. Now your technical sell turn signal would have been the close of this red candle at 3300, but obviously nothing wrong with taking partial profits, especially as you're approaching the resistance of the two previous cycle highs. Now, I'm not going to go through and backtest Ethereum with this BX Trender indicator like I did with Bitcoin, because I just could not be bothered. And ever since Ethereum started nuking through here, I've kind of just given up on it. But here's the thing, every time this cycle people have given up on Ethereum, it has then done something absolutely massive, like a gotcha bar is what Michael calls it. When everyone gets bored, sells out, etc., suddenly it pumps and everyone goes, oh no, they're either waiting to get back in at a lower price or they FOMO in and they realize they can't get in at a lower price, so they keep FOMOing at higher and higher prices. The institutions which bought through here dump to retail and yeah, rinse and repeat. Anyways, Ethereum looks like it has closed above this downward sloping trend line. Now, I did not draw these trend lines myself. I stole them off Jason and Michael Pizzino. Please go check out their channels. I'm just going to casually admit that. But we've got the other trend line up here at around $2,000. The range lows around $2,100, which is quite a historic level for Ethereum, as we've been bouncing through here as support, then resistance in 2023 before we finally broke it as support, held it through most of 2024, 2025, and then obviously we lost it again. So it'll be very interesting to see how Ethereum acts at around 2000, 2100, and the weekly market bias, which is obviously a THT indicator from Traders Helping Traders, Peter DiCarlo. It's pretty much the same as a bull market support band, very similar as you can see. I'm not going to explain how it differs, but basically when you're trading below it, you are weak, and especially when you're below all of these levels as well. So if you manage to snipe the exact low on Ethereum and get in on a nice 5x, 10x, 100x long, or you just bought a massive spot position of 100 Ethereum, congratulations to you, but I am not going to be personally trading this for one reason and one reason only, and that is because Ethereum has stuffed me over a million times in the past. Like, it is one of the few cryptos where the daily 50 TMA strategy has not worked very well. Like you can see, we've constantly been getting these fake pumps and dumps before the trend actually gets going. Same here, like you get faked out there, but obviously here we had a very lovely short and you would have flipped along now on Ethereum, but is anything going to happen, or are we just going to pet her out again like we have a million times in the past? Like, the 50 TMA strategy does not work well on Ethereum, and I've noticed that some of the strategies we teach in TIA, like using Gann swings and all that on the 4-hour chart, also isn't really effective. Like, I just don't know how to trade this market, and sometimes it is like that. Like, not everyone can trade every single market. I know there are some people out there that hit 100x wins on Ethereum left, right, and center, and I'm just like, congratulations to you. But we must stay neutral, whether I like the crypto or not. The weekly 1-bar chart is up, and the daily 50 TMA strategy is long, even though the daily 1-bar and 2-bar charts are neutral. So that's just my take on Ethereum. I really want to see how it acts at this resistance level here. Maybe if it starts flipping 2200 as support, I might try and ride it up to 3000 again. But one thing that we must remember is there is a potential fourth time breakout at $3,900 to $4,000 here. So if Ethereum can do a massive 100 and something percent move, we could very well see it move back up to its high before the high at 4,400, the all-time high at nearly $5,000, and maybe then the Ethereum maxis that are calling for 10K over on X and YouTube might actually be right. So we shall see. XRP over here flipped along on the 50 TMA strategy, and I got a couple of nice trades in on that because of it. And another thing that we can see is the stochastic RSI is about to make a bullish cross, and on the daily BX trender, we've sold off into dark red, but price, has not gone anywhere. So it seems that every dip on XRP is being bought up. Now, unfortunately, the one-day one-bar chart is not green yet, but the weekly chart is actually red. Now, XRP has not flashed the signal that Bitcoin and Ethereum has on the weekly of turning green on the BX trender. Now, I've not backtested this myself on XRP, the BX trender, but one thing I do really like is that we are above the 50-week TMA, similar to Bitcoin, but Ethereum has just absolutely sold off below it. So I think XRP is in a fundamentally stronger position, not fundamentally, technically stronger position than Ethereum. However, we just don't have the momentum at the moment. So I think because of how insane this move is, 50 cents to $3.40, I think XRP needs to potentially chop around a bit more and maybe even actually retest the 50-week TMA, just like Bitcoin did back here. Now, this does not mean I'm calling for a crash next week to $1.50. This means that it's very likely that we just go sideways, maybe up slowly until the weekly TMA comes back up. So maybe the weekly TMA comes back up to $2.20 by June, which is when I've said in my other video today that Bitcoin might break out as well, based on using the BX trend analysis from this move here. So I think that is quite possible, and which is why I'm still holding XRP on spot and I'm still scalping it, but I'm just not holding a long trade because I don't want to be paying interest for a crypto that's just chopping sideways. Speaking of sideways, Solana has formed this lovely V-shaped reversal pattern. We fired long on the 50-day TMA strategy. Unfortunately, I did not long Solana. I don't know why. It's such a clean signal on the 50-day TMA strategy, but anyone that did get in, congratulations. We are now above this important line here, and which we've seen flip as support resistance quite a lot, and obviously $150 is a nice round number. It's not quite 150, it's 143, but you can see the market is stalling at $150. There's not much more to say on the daily chart other than I want to see how Solana acts up at this yellow line here, $190 something, which has been our support trend line since pretty much the ETF Bitcoin pump, as well as our range highs around $210. Not range highs, are significant tops flipped as support, which should potentially act as resistance. Now, as you can see, Solana is neutral across the board on its trend confluence table. But on the weekly chart, Solana closed last week with light green on the BX trender, and this week looks absolutely awesome, which is better than Ethereum and Bitcoin. So for this next move up, I think Solana will outperform Bitcoin based purely upon that, as well as the fact that the next overhead level for Solana is $180 in my opinion. We've got quite a bit of open ground. Now obviously you could go in and draw a bunch of other lines at every $5-8 increments, but I just think Solana, once we can reliably close and hold above this psychological level of $150, we'll see a pretty clean move up to 180, maybe 190, and obviously with the low exchange volume, potentially will sell off and fizzle out a bit, but I think once we can start to break some of these levels through here, the masses will start to FOMO back in, which could push Solana up into some crazy price targets. Like, I think it was Cowboy Trades, another one of my favorite YouTubers or something, that said Solana is following a cycle behind Ethereum and market cap. So if we took Ethereum's market cap from the previous cycle, that would mean Solana would top out like $800 to $1,000 or something like that. And based upon the way that weekly BX Trender is looking, I think Solana is primed to do a pretty strong move. But we do need to flip through all of these resistances first, unfortunately. We are below the weekly 50 TMA, which is not a great sign. USDT dominance, there's not much I can really say here. I think Jason and Michael Pizzino do amazing analysis on here. But using my favorite indicator, the 50-day TMA, you can see we've had this massive dump. I think that's a high volume candle as well. Volume was not that high, but either way, it's a big candle. And you can see in the past, when we see these high volume dumps, not high volume, these big candles, if it's above the 50-day TMA, that usually leads to a bounce. But if it's below, we usually see a bit more continuation before bounce and then a proper sell-off if it's a genuine move. Or we could see a bit of a consolidation and then a pump back up. But obviously, based on all the analysis I did on Bitcoin, I think we are genuinely primed for a proper move. Now you can see here in February 2024, we had this big sell-off and there was no retest, and we just continued. We distributed more, then continued. So you can see here, September 2023, we had a retest before we continued. Like, I think the USDT dominance, the way I look at it, is not really super helpful. So I'm just gonna say go watch Jason and Michael Pizzino's analysis, because their analysis is great. And here, July 2021, big sell-off, small bounce, and then the sell-off continued. So there's really not much I can add to USDT dominance based on what they said, other than watch out for a retest, but potentially another dump first, which would line up with Bitcoin squeezing towards 100, 105K, as I talked about in my other video. On the weekly chart, the USDT dominance has just confirmed. Well, it hasn't confirmed yet because the week hasn't closed, but unless something crazy happens this weekend, you can see that we've got this huge sell signal, which in the past has led to some pretty decent declines. So on my weekly analysis using the BX Trender, I think the USDT dominance is poised to go to range lows of 3.8, 3.7%. And Jason Pizzino obviously said in his videos, if we find support there, that will be the end of the cycle, but for Bitcoin and cryptos. But if we manage to break through there, we will see some absolute crazy mania. US dollar, again, Jason, Michael Pizzino do some amazing analysis. They think we will see a bit of a relief rally, which lines up with my analysis, because although trends are down and we have broken significant support here, which will probably be retested as resistance because the weekly BX Trender is making higher lows. So it's likely that we could see a couple of weeks rally, which would again line up with my theory for Bitcoin, where we will chop sideways, potentially make a few fake dumps, fake pumps, before we start seeing some God candles. So not much more I can add there, except for, I don't do Forex, but if you do, that could be potentially some trades swapping the US dollar between some other currency. or potentially some time for you to lighten off your bags for the cycle as the US dollar strengthens. You sell some of your USDT profits back into your currency and just trade with less and less money as the cycle gets closer to the end to reduce your risk. Potentially something for you to think about. Polkadot, one of my favorite cryptos, just because I find it gets manipulated a lot less than something like Solana or XRP, or even Bitcoin now that we've got all the ETF hype. I just think DOT is just so, like, patterns play out on it so nicely. But anyway, we have fired long on the daily TMA strategy. Trends are up on the 1 day, 1 bar and 2 bar, but we are selling off on the daily BX trender, unfortunately, but we are still above the daily 50 TMA. On the weekly chart, DOT is showing the same sign as Bitcoin. We're getting some nice light green on the BX trender. And as you can see, what happens with DOT is it just does these massive moves up and down. Like, you get, like, as Michael says, you get like a cult-like following that just buys into it with good news, but then just people just sell out of it because no one really wants to hold this forever once uncertainty comes in. So I think we're potentially somewhere through here again, where we might potentially grind a bit lower or just chop sideways, which is exactly what I was saying for my Bitcoin analysis as well, before we might see an absolutely amazing blow-off move. Or, that doesn't have to happen, we could just see a blow-off move straight away, which I didn't actually explore in my Bitcoin analysis, just because technically we could just see a blow-off move. Like, we could close this week up here, we have another big up week, one sideways week, and just we blow off. But as Jason says in his videos, that is not actually great for the cycle, because that means the end of the cycle is closer when you start seeing these vertical bars. Like, after this vertical move on DOT, we went, 10-15% higher, but that was it. Like, anyway, I wouldn't get too excited for DOT because we are still down on the 1 day, 1 bar, 2 bar, 1 week, 1 bar and 2 bar charts. So we could very well, the cycle top could very well already be in for DOT, because we are making lower highs across the last 2 pumps. So maybe we meet some resistance at the 50-week TMA and never get above $6, or we might, top out at $8, $9, similar to these lower swing tops. But either way, that is still a potential 200% trade, and the 50-day TMA strategy is going to keep me in a long until I have a reason to go short, which would be a daily close underneath. So yes, I am trading DOT just because I find the 50 TMA strategy works pretty well on this crypto. Like, there's a lot less fake outs than Ethereum. And when you get a genuine move, whether that's to the long side or the short side, it's just absolutely, absolutely incredible. Over to CRO. As you can see, we have had another light green week, which puts CRO in a pretty nice position. Unfortunately, we are struggling to get above this 50-week TMA, but we are up on the 1 week, 1 bar chart. The daily chart, we are grinding around up and down, above and below the 50 TMA, which is why I'm not using that strategy to long or short, just because I find it a bit messy. And CRO also gets pretty messy with swings, if that's something you're trying to trade with as well. So I am using this momentum-based indicator instead, as well as the fact that in my last super long video, I said that towards the end of the cycle, exchange tokens tend to really pop off. And this cycle, we've been making higher highs every single time. So again, I think CRO might head towards the high 20s, maybe even the 30 cents range, which would be a very nice trade from here, especially as a masses FOMO in. And obviously crypto.com has all those nice lockup rewards if you lock up CRO. And masses aren't thinking, if I lock up my money right now, I won't be able to unlock it for 12 months. What if the cycle ends? And, what if I buy here I can't sell here and I have to sell here instead. So yes, in this period, I got amazing rewards on my card and all that, but I missed out on my deposit being able to do like a 5x. So maybe I made, 3,000 bucks on cash back, this reward, that reward, bonus interest, but I missed out on being able to sell my $3,000 lockup for $10,000. So I've actually made $7,000 less profit. Like, the masses aren't going to think about that. And when people who obviously know what they're doing, they probably locked up their CRO somewhere back here or even back here, and they've made lovely rewards and they've probably, hopefully, unlocked it somewhere here, and you've been selling, buying, like I have. Anyways, not much more to say there. BNB still holding above the daily 50 TMA. We are down on the 1-day 1-bar chart, but you can see despite all this selling pressure here on the daily BX trender, the price hasn't really gone anywhere. So institutions are potentially buying up BNB. Unfortunately, BNB is still not green on the BX trender. We are still down on the 1-week 1-bar and 2-bar charts, and we are not closing above the 50-week TMA. But again, I'm being patient and waiting for something nice to happen. MX had this huge day here where we went from 275 to 306, and we've kind of just petted out. But again, we've got hidden bullish divergences, red daily BX trender, but still price being bought up. Unfortunately, trends are down across the board. And on the weekly, if it's going to load for me, trends are also down, but it looks like we are finally going to close a light green week. So hopefully this means that we are going to see a very lovely reversal on MX, in line with my theory that exchange tokens are going to pop off at the end of the cycle. Over to Rune, which we fired a long signal on the 50 TMA strategy, and Rune has just pumped since then. Now, Rune doesn't look great right now. We've got these big moves down, and if we want to do some volume analysis, we can't because the volume is really close. So instead, we're going to look at the BX trender and see that Rune could potentially, if it starts breaking these lows here, we could see a retest of the 50 TMA. Now, Rune has done similar things in the past. You can see where you get a breakout, it retests, and then it really pops off. Same here, like you get a breakout, a retest, another pump, a second retest, where you actually end up going below the 50 TMA, but it closes back above it very quickly, and then it really pops off. So I wouldn't be worried at all if Rune comes back to retest the 50 TMA. I've closed my entire trade out, which I could end up regretting. Like, we could just see a snap reversal and then Rune pops back off to $1.50, $2, $3, $10. But Rune is another one of those cryptos where I think the hype is just not there anymore, especially with all the FUD that happened through here. Kind of like just it might pump, but I don't think it's going to recover after that sort of FUD. Especially because we've seen so many green weeks on the BX trender, but price really hasn't gone anywhere. Now, that being said, you can see here, we had a whole bunch of green on the BX trender. Price didn't really pump anywhere, and then all of a sudden it goes. And same here, like Rune, we had all this green on the BX trender. Price just didn't really go anywhere, and then all of a sudden, zoom. So could something like that happen? Could we rally into a lower high, which I think is the likely scenario, at $4.20, which is still an absolutely massive 300 and something % move here. So we could meet resistance somewhere through here, like the breakdown zone, the 50-week TMA. So Rune is definitely something on my watch list. Is not. I think I did a quick scalp here, long, like I think $6 to $7 or something like that. And probably one of my biggest regrets in life was not going short on OM, because we actually got a short signal on the 50-day TMA. Like if you had shorted here at $6.20, you would have been holding short all the way through here. You had a chance to get out for a profit here. Obviously with that big reversal, you would have lost your chance the next day. Here you would have gone long, 670. So if you'd followed the strategy to the teeth, you would have lost, 10% on a 10x. Then you would have gone short here at 642. So you would have again lost maybe 5% on a 10x. But then that short would have been absolutely insane. Like I think that was like a 90% drop or something like that, 80% drop. So you'd have made like 800% on a 10x. And assuming you were following the 50-day TMA strategy through here, you would have absolutely printed on some long trades. So who knows? Maybe in a couple months' time, we might see a rally into a lower high using the 50-day TMA strategy. But I think for a while, I will not be looking at OM. ADA. Again, same thing as a lot of the other things I've talked about. Selling pressure on the BX trender. Price isn't going anywhere. We're long on the 50-day TMA strategy, even though we're still down on the daily 1-bar chart. Weekly chart is down, but we are holding above the weekly 50 TMA, and the BX trender is making higher lows, but isn't green yet. So similar to XRP, I think because of how hard ADA has pumped, it just needs more time to cool off. And sitting above this 50-week TMA just means it's consolidating in a stronger position, which means the next move will probably be stronger than something like OM, where it's just melted below all its support levels. SUI, again, trends are up across the board. We long on the 50 TMA strategy flipped long, and you would have gotten an absolutely spectacular trade. Just like you would have gotten an absolutely spectacular trade doing the 50-day TMA strategy up through end of 2024, start of 2025, and you would have also gotten in a beautiful short here. So it's strange because SUI pumps and dumps so much, but it actually still follows technical analysis. Like it follows this 50-day TMA strategy so well. Now, obviously here, we look like, even though this week's reversing a bit, we are still making our second big green week on the BX trender. So if we do a fib retracement from our high to low, you can see that we are pretty much, we are losing the 50% level, unfortunately. We have pretty much stopped dead on it. Like Michael Pizzino and Jason Pizzino would be like, this is how great Gann's teachings are, English, and this is how important 50% levels are. So if I draw this 50% level like this, you can see SUI could potentially come down and retest the 50% level, and by then, if this takes a couple of weeks, similar to what I think is going to happen for the rest of the market, we might need to consolidate and correct a little bit. The 50-week TMA might come up to $2.80, which would be a perfect bounce, leading us into another huge rally. Now, I don't really have price targets for this because I think Jason Pizzino does a great job on his channel, so I don't need to copy any of his work, but I would be prepared for a correction in SUI, especially because we are now in the institutional, my bad. Oh boy, it's been, there we go. No, we are not in the institutional sell zone. Forget that. Next, render. Again, we fired long on the 50-day TMA strategy, and although we had a couple of fake outs here, we got a real rally this time. Trends are up across the board. Weekly chart. We have 3 weeks of green, which is awesome. Now, what do I think is going to happen to render? Well, if the rest of the market consolidates, Render will probably also consolidate. But I think because we've got our 3 green weeks, we are very likely to continue pushing to the next resistance level, which would potentially be these tops through here. So if you could draw an imaginary line through there, we had support, flipped resistance, flipped support, and potentially acting as resistance, which would line up pretty well with the 50-week TMA at $6.10. SAI. Daily chart, 50 TMA strategy, flipped long, big move up, green across the board, and again, we've gotten 2 green weeks on the 50-week TMA. Now, unfortunately for SAI, we have fallen so much that we could see some significant resistance down at these range lows here. So I'd be very keen to see how SAI responds to the 25 to 30 cent level. But if we can clear that, I would want to see 40 cents flipped as support before I get excited for significant pumps or all-time highs, especially because the 1 week chart is still neutral. Anyways, that is it for today. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.